In the last update, we announced that Manifold Garden is now playable from start to finish. Afterwards, a few people asked me what was there still left to do, so I thought I'd show in this video some of the issues that we're currently tackling. It's basically a bunch of little things. In terms of design, there are a lot of areas in the game that are currently placeholder. While they're perfectly fine in terms of getting the player from point A to point B, they're not very interesting and they look terrible. So one of the design tasks I'm doing is replacing them with better thought out areas. In terms of visuals, again, lots of little things. We had a certain cube that showed up just fine in the editor, but in the build it showed up as pink, which means either the material is missing or something is wrong with the shader. It turned out that we were changing the shader on the material at runtime, and while this works fine in the editor, it doesn't work in the build. And the reason is that in the editor, if the shader has new variables, they do get initialized properly, but in the build this doesn't happen. The solution was basically just to create a new material with the new shader and include that with the build, and then instead of changing the shader, we changed the material. It wasn't a major issue and wasn't that hard to solve, but when you get a bunch of things like this, it does take up time. For art, we've started to replace various assets in the game. There's still a lot of work to be done, but it's moving in the right direction. For audio, we've continued to make refinements and adjustments and are tracking down various issues. One of the custom tools that we have is this panel that lets us display every single sound currently playing in the game and also switch them on or off. This makes it incredibly easy for us to isolate certain sounds when we're trying to debug, because when you're trying to debug audio, it's really tricky to figure out exactly what the source of the problem is. For example, I noticed that when I walked into this room, a certain sound became louder, and I wasn't clear exactly what that sound was. So using these tools, I was able to identify that it was the ambient sound from this laser controller. And there were two issues. One, I could hear the sound from really far away, which didn't feel right. And two, when you walked into the room, it actually got louder, which also didn't feel right. The issue turned out not to be the sound event's volume increasing, but actually the reverb of the event increasing in volume. The event is part of a bus, which is basically a group of sounds in Fmod, and the bus is getting sent to the reverb, and the event is getting sent to the reverb. So this means that it's actually getting sent to the reverb channel twice. And so we were sending the signal to the reverb channel before the 3D location was taken into account, which meant that we were hearing the reverb of the signal in 2D. So the solution was to not send the event directly, but instead to have it go through the bus. That's it for this time. I'm going to try to keep these video updates coming weekly. As always, let me know if you have any feedback or questions in the comments section below. Also, let me know if there are any topics you'd like me to cover in the future. There's lots of ways to stay updated: mailing lists, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Discord, and Twitch. You can also wishlist the game on Steam. All right, I'll see you next time.